Here we are back in Scriptorium, and I am inventorying books. Last week, I took way too long, half an hour, to discuss a bit about the the McLuhan Dewline newsletter, which go see last week's episode if you want to learn more about that. I ended up having to rush. I thought I would have plenty of time, but half an hour isn't a lot of time to talk about that. And I kind of rushed through the second half, so I maybe talked about a dozen of the issues. Anyway, this week I'm back doing books, and it'll be a little less exciting right now. I've got Essaying Essays, Alternative Forms of Exposition by Richard Kostelanetz, which has a note in it from the AC Institute, March 20th, 2012. Dear Eric McLuhan, on behalf of the AC Institute and Richard Kostelanetz, I'm sending you a copy of the newly released edition of the 1975 book by Richard Kostelanetz. Thank you for your participation. Here is your complimentary copy. I have no idea what Dad's participation was, but it might have something to do with the Wyndham Lewis blast or something to do with Marshall McLuhan. Anyway, it's kind of interesting. I just noticed on the inside here, it's not a great book or anything. I mean, technically it's not very good edition. But it says here, the essay is the most flexible and inclusive of literary forms. It can be described as any relatively brief composition in prose which undertakes to discuss a point or to persuade us to accept a thesis on any subject whatsoever. The essay differs from a formal treatise in being addressed to a general audience instead of to an audience of specialists. As a consequence, it discusses its subject in a non-technical fashion, and often with a liberal use of such devices as anecdote, illustrations, and humor to augment its appeal. M. H. Abrams, A Glossary of Literary Terms, 1957. Wonderful, versatile things, essays. So I just actually started documenting this, and today we'll be back to the more drudgery of the inventory process. So I've got the title down. I've put down Richard Kostelanetz, editor. It's a paperback. It is in good condition. It is from the AC Institute, New York. No idea what that is. The AC Institute, 1975, 2012. Dad's name isn't in it, but there is things from the AC Institute for Participation, whatever that means. And there aren't any otherwise notes or marks in it. I'm in a bit of a time rush today because it happens to be my eldest boy Ezra's birthday. Ezra, if you're watching this sometime in the distant future, happy birthday, my boy. I love you. He turns 5 today, which is kind of amazing. So a brief overview. We are in the library of my late father, Eric McLuhan. It is around 6,000 volumes, and I am undertaking to document and inventory the collection. As you'll see, I'm doing a basic publication data, but also making a note of anything special about the books, degree of annotation, anything included, things for future reference, and things that set aside the books. In case you notice up here, I happen to have 2 copies of The Medium is the Massage LP. And the one is the original from '69. That's the one on the left here. And the second is the reissue from 2012, which features the amazing, really cool essay from DJ Spooky, Paul, about Marshall McLuhan and the Art of the Record, which is really cool. And you can check that out online. His essay's up there. And I heartily recommend reading it. It's pretty neat. Also, if you buy the vinyl, which was 2011, the reissue, it's all in there too. And you can get it online really cheap, like $20 or something. I think that's what I paid for it. I think I paid about the same for an edition of the original off Discogs, $20 or $30. So it's kooky and it's worth checking out. I recommend it. Next, we have Grownup Digital, how the net generation is changing your world. An interesting thing about doing my dad's library against doing Marshall's library, which I did about 10 years ago. I did the same sort of thing. Is Marshall's books all stopped around 1980 when he died, but dad's, my father's library, well, they go up to his death last year anyway, and so I have books of that were in Marshall's library as well, next to books like this, Grownup Digital, How the Net Generation is Changing Your World, Don Tapscott, which is interesting. Dad was also making note of what was new. He wasn't just caught up in the good old stuff. You know, there's no book like an old book. So let's move on and get some of this done. I'm going to keep it to a hot 16 this week and try not to run over time. I try to keep it to 15 minutes because I don't want to bore you, and it's faster if I do it myself, as much as I appreciate the company. So title, Grownup Digital, the net generation is changing. Oh, just another thing to mention. Last week I thanked, what happened there? Last week I thanked Scott McGovern and Ed Video in Guelph. They had me down there to give an incredible 2-hour talk. Not incredible for the content, I'm sure, just the length. A couple of years ago, and they sent me a donation. I have this Founders Club thing going for the McLuhan Institute to help me raise the ridiculous amount of money I need to raise to get it done. If you want to join and give me $500 toward that, you too can be listed as a founding member. So last week I had a nice check from Ed Video for that. And this week, a really generous donation of the same by Father Leo Riley of Toronto, who also sent me a check and wanted to help me get things going with TMI. He was also one of 4 priests that came down here to Picton for my father's second funeral in May. So thanks twice, Father Leo. Appreciate it. Back to books. It's a wonder I get anything done in here, right? All this chatting, talk. Tapscott. I joke about it being nice to have company, but it is actually nice to have your company, so thank you for being here. There's a lot of blurbs in the front of this. Richard Florida, Bill McEwen, Fred Smith, McGraw Hill, 2009, New York. Dad's name isn't in it. There's a bookmark. Not sure what those numbers mean right now. There's a note preference with a 7-digit number. I think that has to do with Via Rail, local trains. My dad used to take the train into Toronto every week to teach at the Harris Institute for the Arts. They were retired many years ago now. So Mr. Tapscott references Marshall McLuhan on 5 pages in here, but no notes from Dad. So we'll just note that there's a bookmark. I took a picture of the shelf that I'm working on and put it up on the Instagram today. If you want to take a look at the titles that you won't be seeing, because I'm going to cut this off in 5 minutes or so. The Death of the Grownup. Another thing that's interesting, doing Dad's library as opposed to when I did Marshall's books, is that a lot of the books that I cataloged of Marshall's, I think there were 200 boxes that I unpacked that had been kicking around. A lot of the books were on the shelves, but more of them were in boxes. Difference in Dad's library is that they're all up on the shelves in his organization and relations. So, Grownup Digital next to The Death of the Grownup. Dad was real cute with stuff, so things were placed in particular ways, and I'm starting to get a feel for things. So there's relation between the books. The library, individual books mean something. Books in relation to each other mean another thing, and the library at the whole is another level. And then you can also look at this library against Marshall's library. The two really, Eric's library flows out of Marshall's and is very much a companion. Death of the Grownup, How America's Arrested How America's Arrested Development is Bringing Down Western Civilization by Diana West. And it's a hardcover. Dad didn't often spring for the hardcover. He put his name in it too. Let's get the publication data down here. New York, St. Martin's. St. Martin's Press. 2007. First edition. And that's nice. Dad's name is it, Eric McLuhan. Gilead Road, August 2012. Oh, okay, so I didn't get it right when it came out. Picked it up used or a few years after the fact. Oh, and there are a lot of notes. So, underlining. Well, this talks to Dad. On page 5, we have an underlining. Instead of eternal salvation, of course, we now seek instant fulfillment. Talking Dad's language here. Here we have a C/M center margin. Lots of underlining. It's Marshall in the footnotes. Do occasionally see Dad in the footnotes. No, Marshall's not in the footnotes. What do you know? Well, he's not always named, he's often there. Yeah, so there's a fair bit of note in the back of here. A figure ground, being without becoming, metaphysics talk there. Doom of Youth, there's a Wyndham Lewis reference. Culture Without Boundaries, Churchill. Cool. I do wish I had time to read more into these, but the idea is to get this inventory done sooner than later. And I'm just going to make a note of the annotation. There's a lot of annotation, full page, and annotations on figure ground. Lewis. Just making note of the kinds of annotations in it so that informal cause. Let's have a look at that one. Here we have a notation, page 32, casting shadows, formal cause. The phrase there is that coming events cast their shadows before them. You see the effect before you see the cause. And it's referencing that on page 32. Of course, Dad put out a whole book on that called Media Informal Cause, which you should check out, obviously. There's the annotation, FC. Well, let's see the paragraph. And as 17 might have put it, 'twasn't ever thus. With the apotheosis of James Dean, almost everything necessary to make the transformation from traditionally adult-oriented society to an adolescent one was in place. And that was long before the Beatles arrived on the American scene in 1964. Environmental conditions. No. Formal cause. Cool. We're over 15 minutes, so I'll leave it there. Thanks for being here, everybody. You can support me on Patreon if you like, patreon.com/McLuhan. And tune in next week. Catch me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all that. Thanks. Good night.